You ever pick your feet in Poughkeepsie? The French Connection wasn't just a gritty cop thriller. It was a raw, nerve-shredding descent into obsession, corruption, and chaos, on screen and behind the camera. Production was brutal, stunts without permits, real criminals hanging around set, and a car chase that nearly killed pedestrians. This wasn't a polished studio film. It was guerrilla filmmaking with millions of dollars on the line. Today we're exposing 20 strange facts about the French Connection that even die-hard cinephiles don't know. And stick around for the bonus fact. It reveals a shocking detail about how far the filmmakers really went to blur the line between fiction and reality. Buckle in. Let's begin. Gene Hackman almost quit the role. Gene Hackman wasn't the first choice for Popeye Doyle. The producers chased Paul Newman, then Steve McQueen, and even Peter Boyle before Hackman reluctantly accepted. But when he read the script, Hackman hated Doyle's racism and brutality. He argued with director William Friedkin, saying, "I can't play such a hateful man." Friedkin pushed him relentlessly, even mocking Hackman's acting during takes to provoke real anger. Hackman considered quitting multiple times. Ironically, that tension fueled his raw performance, earning him the Oscar. It wasn't a comfortable casting choice, it was a war of wills. What audiences didn't see was that Hackman's discomfort with Doyle's darker side is exactly what gave the character its unsettling complexity. The chase scene wasn't fully legal. The legendary chase, car against subway train, was filmed without city permits. Friedkin insisted on real New York traffic for authenticity. Stunt driver Bill Hickman roared through 26 blocks at nearly 90 miles per hour, weaving between unsuspecting cars and pedestrians. A mother pushing a stroller barely escaped being hit. That moment made it into the final cut. Police cooperation was minimal, and Friedkin later admitted, "We were insane. We just did it." This wasn't Hollywood magic. It was chaos on the streets, risking lives to capture adrenaline on celluloid. That recklessness is why the chase still feels terrifyingly real. It actually was. Friedkin fired his cinematographer after one day. Initially, Owen Roizman wasn't the cinematographer. Friedkin hired another DP, but after one day of shooting, he declared the footage too pretty. Friedkin wanted grit, grime, and grain, not polished Hollywood lighting. He fired the original DP on the spot and brought in Roizman, who transformed the film with handheld shots and muted colors. The result? A documentary-like realism that set the French Connection apart. Not glamorous, but raw. Not studio sheen, but street grit. It's the choice that gave the film its iconic urban texture. The real Popeye Doyle hated Hackman. The film was based on real detectives Eddie Egan and Sonny Grosso. Egan, the inspiration for Popeye Doyle, despised Hackman's portrayal. He thought Hackman was too soft, too restrained, and not nearly as intimidating as the real man. "He couldn't play me on my worst day," Egan scoffed. The irony? Hackman's version won an Oscar, while Egan ended up playing small roles in films and TV. The tension between real cop and Hollywood cop highlighted a bigger truth. The line between truth and myth blurred in the film's making. Doyle may not have been a perfect mirror, but he became something larger, a cinematic archetype. They filmed in real heroin dens. Friedkin wanted authenticity at all costs. Instead of studio sets, he shot in actual New York heroin dens, using locations where real addicts had lived and died. The production crew sometimes found needles on the floor before rolling cameras. Actors were warned not to touch anything. This raw choice infused scenes with a chilling realism. Audiences weren't just seeing set design. They were glimpsing the actual decay of early 70s New York. Not a controlled Hollywood illusion, but a snapshot of urban collapse. The city itself became another dangerous character in the film. Friedkin rode in the car during the chase. Most directors would sit safely behind the camera. William Friedkin wasn't most directors. He climbed into the backseat of the Pontiac Le Mans during the infamous chase sequence, holding the camera himself. No steady rig, no controlled conditions, just Friedkin bouncing around as Bill Hickman floored it through live traffic. At one point, Friedkin nearly dropped the camera as the car swerved inches from a bus. He later admitted he wasn't insured to be there. If they'd crashed, the film would have lost its director on the spot. Not staged, but reckless. Not safe, but unforgettable. That raw, shaking camera work is why audiences still feel like they're clinging to the backseat of a runaway car. The French Connection was rejected by every major studio. Before it became a classic, the film was an orphan. Every major Hollywood studio turned it down, calling it too dark, too depressing, and uncommercial. Even 20th Century Fox passed at first, unsure if audiences wanted a cop film where the hero was racist and violent. Producer Philip D'Antoni finally convinced Fox by slashing the budget to under $2 million, promising he could shoot fast and dirty. It wasn't Hollywood's golden child, it was Hollywood's reject. Ironically, the film's stripped-down outsider energy became its strength, proving that raw grit could outshine polished studio fare. Roy Scheider almost died, filming a scene. In one scene, Roy Scheider's character, Buddy Russo, struggles with a suspect on a rooftop. The fight wasn't carefully choreographed. Friedkin urged the actors to go at it rough, pushing realism. At one moment, Scheider was nearly shoved off the roof's edge. Crew members lunged in, pulling him back just in time. Scheider later said the near accident made him realize how far Friedkin was willing to go for authenticity. It wasn't safe, but it was convincing. Russo's vulnerability in the film feels real because Scheider genuinely felt his life was on the line. The film's ending was controversial and studio-hated. The French Connection ends abruptly. Popeye Doyle fires his gun into the darkness, chasing shadows. Then, fade to black. No resolution, no triumph, just obsession without closure. Executives at Fox were furious, insisting audiences would revolt. Friedkin fought to keep it, saying, "That's the truth of obsession. There's no end." The gamble worked. Instead of disappointment, audiences left shaken. The lack of closure became a bold statement about futility in law enforcement and morality. Not the ending people wanted, but the ending they couldn't forget. Friedkin lied to Hackman to get his anger. Hackman was too restrained in early takes. Friedkin wanted volcanic rage, so he played dirty. Between takes, he told Hackman that his father, who Hackman was deeply sensitive about, would be ashamed of his performance. Hackman erupted in fury, storming onto set for the next scene. That rage stayed in the final cut, immortalizing Doyle's explosive temper. Friedkin admitted years later it was cruel, but it worked. The line between direction and manipulation blurred. What the audience saw wasn't acting polished in rehearsal. It was raw, personal fury captured on film. And before we hit the next round of shocking truths, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next facts show just how dangerous, chaotic, and downright insane the shoot became. The subway scene nearly ended in disaster. The subway chase was just as chaotic as the car sequence. Friedkin didn't secure all the permissions, and the New York Transit Authority was skeptical about letting him film underground. He got away with limited access by paying off a few officials and promising minimal disruption. But once the cameras rolled, chaos erupted. Real passengers were on the train, some terrified they were witnessing an actual crime. At one point, the motorman overshot his mark and nearly caused a collision. The panic wasn't staged. Those looks of fear on passengers' faces were genuine. It wasn't controlled spectacle. It was barely contained disaster, and that's why it feels so raw on screen. Gene Hackman accidentally punched a co-star. Hackman's Popeye Doyle was meant to be rough, unpredictable, and physical. During a take, Hackman was supposed to grab actor Marcel Bozzuffi, who played the French assassin Pierre Nicolai. But in the heat of the moment, Hackman swung too hard and landed a real punch to Bozzuffi's face. Cameras kept rolling. Bozzuffi stumbled, bloodied, but stayed in character. The footage was so real that Friedkin kept parts of it. Hackman later apologized profusely, but Friedkin only smiled. Not rehearsed, not fake. just the brutal unpredictability that Friedkin craved. Friedkin took inspiration from documentaries. The film's gritty look wasn't an accident. Friedkin was obsessed with cinema verite, the documentary style that put audiences in the middle of real events. He watched hours of verite films and told Owen Roizman, "Make this look like surveillance." That's why handheld cameras, natural light, and grainy stock dominate the visuals. Friedkin wanted viewers to feel like they were spying, not watching a polished drama. It wasn't movie glamour. It was police surveillance turned into cinema. That documentary influence not only defined the French Connection, but also shaped the next decade of gritty crime films. The real case was even stranger. The film was inspired by a real 1962 heroin bust known as the French Connection case. But the true story was even stranger than what ended up on screen. Detectives Eddie Egan and Sonny Grosso uncovered 246 pounds of heroin hidden in a car shipped from France, valued at over $30 million. But the case didn't end cleanly. Corruption charges, botched prosecutions, and rumors of missing drugs haunted the aftermath. Friedkin and his screenwriters downplayed some of these details, fearing audiences wouldn't believe them. In other words, the truth was too messy, even for Hollywood. Hackman shadowed real detectives and hated it. To prepare for the role, Hackman followed Eddie Egan and Sonny Grosso on their nightly rounds. What he saw disturbed him: racial profiling, brutal interrogations, and cops who bent the law to its breaking point. Hackman later admitted, "I couldn't stand how they treated people." But those nights informed his performance. He didn't have to imagine Doyle's ugliness. He witnessed it firsthand. It wasn't acting built in rehearsal rooms. It was acting soaked in real police brutality observed on the streets of New York in 1970. The ugliness you see in Doyle? Hackman pulled it directly from life. 16. A cameraman was nearly killed. During filming during the chaotic car chase, a camera operator was stationed dangerously low to the street to capture the blur of the Pontiac Le Mans. A taxi unexpectedly swerved into the lane, missing the cameraman by inches. Friedkin later admitted he pushed his crew too far, saying, "We were crazy. I wouldn't do it again." That near-death moment haunted the crew, yet the footage made it into the final film. The terror wasn't simulated. It was real people risking their lives for a few unforgettable shots. The chase became legendary, but behind the scenes it left scars of fear that never quite faded. The villain was cast for his cold eyes. Marcel Bozzuffi, who played the French hitman Pierre Nicolai, wasn't cast for his resume. He was cast for his stare. Friedkin reportedly said, "I needed eyes that could kill." Bozzuffi's chilling gaze unsettled even the cast. Hackman recalled feeling genuine discomfort filming close-ups with him. Off camera, Bozzuffi was warm and polite. But on set, his transformation into a predator felt disturbingly real. Not just an actor in costume, but a silent presence that radiated menace. That casting choice gave the film its quiet, unnerving villain, someone who didn't need words to terrify. The studio wanted a happier ending. Fox executives were terrified audiences wouldn't accept a movie where the hero fails and the villain slips away. They pushed for a more conventional Hollywood ending, Doyle arresting Charnier, or at least scoring a final victory. Friedkin flatly refused. "Life doesn't wrap up neat," he argued. Instead, he delivered that haunting fade to black. The studio reluctantly agreed, expecting backlash. Instead, critics hailed the ending as groundbreaking. What seemed like a commercial liability became the film's most iconic feature. Not neat, not safe, but unforgettable. The film was banned in some countries. The French Connection's raw violence and unflattering portrayal of law enforcement didn't sit well overseas. Some European countries briefly banned or heavily censored the film, citing graphic brutality and corruption themes harmful to public trust. In France, officials bristled at the suggestion that their country was a hub for heroin smuggling. Ironically, the controversy only fueled curiosity. Bootleg copies circulated, and the film gained an underground following. What censors tried to suppress ended up amplifying the movie's legend, not erased from history, but etched deeper by resistance. The Oscars nearly didn't happen for it. When The French Connection was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, Fox wasn't confident it could win. Studio insiders worried the Academy would balk at its brutality, but momentum built. Hackman won Best Actor, Friedkin Best Director, and the film took home Best Picture. Still, insiders revealed the voting was razor-thin, and some members lobbied hard against rewarding such a grim story. Winning was no guarantee, it was a knife's-edge victory. That uncertainty made its sweep all the more shocking. A film born in rejection ended up conquering Hollywood's biggest night. Friedkin had a gun on set. Perhaps the strangest detail, William Friedkin sometimes carried a handgun during production. Crew members later revealed he used it as a psychological tool, slamming it on tables during heated arguments or flashing it to assert authority. Hackman admitted it unsettled everyone, saying, "You never knew how far Billy would go." Friedkin later claimed it was a prop, though accounts differ. Was it theater? Was it intimidation? No one can say for certain. But it blurred the line between filmmaker and dictator, adding yet another layer of chaos to an already unhinged production. Closing reflection. The French Connection wasn't just a crime thriller, it was a collision of obsession, danger, and guerrilla filmmaking. What audiences saw was a masterpiece. What the cast and crew endured was near madness. The legacy? A film that redefined gritty realism, changed how thrillers were shot, and proved that sometimes recklessness and brilliance are separated by a single frame of film. If you love these hidden truths, hit like, subscribe, and share. Because there's always another story behind the camera. And remember, you ever pick your feet in Poughkeepsie?